Welcome, everyone. Ready to dive into something we all kind of, go through but don't really think about too much? Aging. We're going to tackle how what we think about getting older could actually, shape how we actually age. Crazy, right?
Yes, super fascinating research out there. And we're going to unpack some pretty mind-blowing studies and ideas, get you thinking.
Our source material today is an excerpt from Mindfulness Part 03.mp3, which, well, digs deep into this. So the big question is, can we hit rewind on the aging process just by, tweaking our mindset?
Right off the bat, the source jumps into this idea of premature cognitive commitments to show how what we believe now actually sets the stage for later on.
Premature cognitive commitments. Okay, that sounds kind of like intense. Can you break that down a bit?
Picture this, right? Ever heard someone say something like, I'd rather, not be around than end up in a nursing home? Boom. Premature cognitive commitment, judging the experience they haven't even had.
And the source is saying these kind of preset ideas might actually make that experience more likely to be that way.
Bingo. Think about it. If we're convinced nursing homes are depressing, we go in with a negative vibe, right? Could impact everyone, ourselves included. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy sort of thing.
Whoa, that makes you wonder, what other assumptions are we carrying around about getting older that are low-key shaping our future without us even realizing it?
That's where mindfulness comes in. The source says, if we can tune into our thoughts and beliefs about aging, we can start to challenge the ones that aren't doing us any favors.
So it's not just avoiding negative thoughts about aging, but actually fostering positive ones too.
You got it. And there's some pretty wild research back this up. The source talks about this study where researchers basically tried to turn back the clock for a group of older guys.
Wait, turn back the clock. Sounds like something out of a movie.
Right. They created this whole time capsule environment, like painstakingly recreating life as it was 20 years prior, back in 1959. Vintage magazines, you name it.
So they totally immersed these guys in a world that felt like their younger years.
Exactly. And throughout this time travel experiment, they measured a bunch of physical and psychological stuff to see if it actually, made a difference.
So did it work? Did it actually reverse aging?
The results are pretty remarkable. The men in that 1959 environment, they actually showed improvements in things like physical strength, flexibility, even their vision and memory got sharper.
No way. So just by shifting their mindset back to a time when they felt younger, their bodies kind of followed suit.
Seems like it. Shows you the crazy connection between our minds and bodies, even as we get older.
That's insane. But how does this tie back to mindfulness? This sounds more like, I don't know, time travel than meditation.
Great question. The source connects mindfulness and creativity here, saying both are about, breaking free from rigid mindsets.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. How does creativity fit into all of this?
They use this example of photographer Joel Meyerowitz at the Grand Canyon. He noticed that tourists were so fixated on finding that, perfect spot for the iconic photo that they were totally missing the beauty right there in front of them.
So hung up on how the Grand Canyon should look that they weren't actually, seeing it.
Exactly. And that's where mindfulness comes in. By practicing it, we learn to ditch those expectations and be more open to new experiences.
So it's about tapping into that childlike wonder, that curiosity.
Totally. And the source says that same openness is essential for creativity too.
Yeah.
When we ditch preconceived notions and approach the world with wonder, boom, possibilities open up.
Makes me think of those aha moments when you finally get something, or see something from a different angle, suddenly things click.
That's that mental flexibility, man. Mindfulness and creativity, they both nurture that. The source talks about conditional learning to explain how this works.
Conditional learning, haven't heard of that one.
Think of regular learning like this IS. Conditional learning is more, this could be. It's about embracing uncertainty and accepting multiple interpretations.
So instead of hard facts, it encourages exploring different perspectives and possibilities.
Yep. And the source argues that kind of flexible thinking is super important for both mindfulness and creativity.
Yeah, makes sense. If you're only exposed to one way of thinking, you're less likely to question things or come up with new ideas.
Absolutely. And studies show that conditional learning can actually boost creativity. There's this one where they showed people objects in two ways, either this is a hairdryer, or this could be a hairdryer.
I bet the could-be folks got way more creative with the objects.
I nailed it. The This Could Be group came up with all sorts of innovative uses because their minds were primed for possibilities.
That's so cool. It makes you wonder if, traditional education with its emphasis on right answers might actually be stifling creativity in kids.
Interesting thought, right?
Hmm.
The source definitely wants us to consider that.
This is really making me think. Mindfulness, aging, creativity, they're all linked in ways I never considered before.
Yeah, man. And we're just scratching the surface here. The source also talks about some cool links between creativity and uncertainty in childhood experiences.
Now, I'm really curious. Childhood and creativity, what's the connection?
They mentioned a study that compared, like, super creative kids with kids who aced IQ tests.
So, like, creative geniuses versus academically gifted kids.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And the interesting thing is the parents of those creative kids, they tended to be more, well, open to uncertainty in their parenting, less about do it this way and more about let's explore together.
That's like how kids naturally are, right? Curious, imaginative, they don't have those mental boundaries we adults build up.
Right. And the source asks this provocative question.
Hmm.
Could some uncertainty in childhood actually boost creativity? It challenges a lot of our ideas about how we nurture creativity.
It definitely makes you think, especially as a parent or educator. If we're always telling kids the right way, are we limiting their ability to think outside the box?
It's a possibility. The source wants us to consider the benefits of a more open approach, embracing exploration and a bit of uncertainty.
This whole conversation is making me rethink how I approach, like, learning and problem solving myself. I'm seeing how sticking to rigid mindsets can hold us back from growth and creativity.
And that leads to another fascinating connection the source explores, the role of analogy making in both mindfulness and creativity.
Ooh, analogies. Those are fun.
Right. And the source points out how thinking in analogies forces us to see links between things that seem totally different. It's about stepping outside our normal thought patterns.
So another way to break free from those mental boxes and expand our perspectives.
Exactly. And this ability to think in analogies is, according to the source, key for both mindfulness and creativity. Helps us see the world differently, make new connections, and spark those innovative ideas.
It's like they say, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always gotten. Analogies help us break those patterns and see things from a new angle.
Precisely. And the source really encourages listeners to explore this connection further. How can we use analogies to deepen our understanding, spark new ideas, and approach the world with a more mindful, creative lens?
Those are some great questions to ponder, and I have a feeling this deep dive is just the start of a much bigger journey for me.
I think you're right. We've uncovered some mind-blowing concepts today, and I'm excited to see where this all leads.
It's funny, when we say, like, turn back the clock on aging, people imagine some crazy tech or a magic potion.
Yeah, like zap, wrinkles gone, instant energy boost. But what if the secret's, already inside us, in our minds?
That's what this research is pointing to. Remember that time travel experiment we talked about? Let's dig into that a little more.
I'm all in. I still can't get over how just being in an environment that reminded those guys of their younger days has such a big impact physically, too.
Pretty wild, huh? Imagine being whisked back to 1959. All those sights, sounds, even the conversations from that time. Like stepping into a time machine? I wonder what that would even feel like, to be surrounded by all those, like, familiar things from your past.
They really went all out to make it authentic.
Yeah.
Vintage magazines, music from that era, even the way they talked to each other was like straight out of 1959.
So it wasn't just remembering, they were fully immersed, all the senses, like bringing those memories to life?
Exactly. And to make the study, really solid, they had a control group too. These folks also reminisced, but they weren't in that time warp setting.
Smart move. That way you can see if it's really the mindset shift that's making a difference.
Right. And as we said, both groups saw some improvements, which isn't surprising. Relaxing retreat, good food, hanging out, that's going to benefit anyone.
It's like a mini vacation for your mind and body, right?
Yeah.
Time to recharge.
But here's where it gets really interesting. The group that was like fully in that 1959 mindset, they had even bigger improvements.
Okay, I'm hooked. What kind of changes are we talking?
Their joint flexibility actually increased, which is crazy because, well, stiff joints are usually seen as like part of getting older, unavoidable.
So they weren't just feeling younger, their bodies were actually like acting younger.
Seems that way. They also had improvements in posture, vision, even did better on those brain games.
Wow, that's impressive. What about the control group? Did they change much?
Oh, yeah. Theirs was more, well, emotional. They got more outgoing, expressive, more engaged with each other.
That's so sweet. Even without the full time travel thing, just remembering and connecting with others lifted their mood.
Speaks to the power of nostalgia and just like how important it is to have those connections, especially as we age.
It's like those happy memories, shared experiences. They give us a sense of belonging, purpose.
Exactly. But let's go back to those physical changes in the time travelers. At first, the researchers thought it was all mindset, like their bodies were literally believing they were younger.
Makes sense. If you believe it, maybe your body follows. But you mentioned another theory, something about mindfulness.
Yeah. They realized that both groups, time warped or just reminiscing,
Yeah.
they were, well, more mindful just by being in the experiment.
How so? How does remembering the past count as mindfulness?
Think about it. Both groups were actively recalling, reflecting on their younger selves, and trying new things at the retreat. That takes, like, being present, paying attention.
So maybe it wasn't just what they were thinking, but how they were thinking more mindfully that led to the changes.
That's what's so fascinating. And it raises questions about, how beneficial mindfulness can be in general, whether we're reliving the past or just being in the now.
Pretty empowering, right? Maybe we have more control over how we age than we think.
Right. It's not literally reversing time, but finding ways to engage with life fully at any age.
Love that way of looking at it. It's about embracing what each stage of life has to offer, not being afraid of getting older.
And speaking of embracing, the source gets into this cool link between mindfulness and creativity.
Now, that's something I'm really into. I've always loved creative stuff, but never thought of it with mindfulness before.
It's a powerful connection. The source is saying both need us to, break free from rigid thinking, embrace new perspectives. They even use intuition to illustrate this.
Intuition, that's a little mysterious. How does that fit in with mindfulness and creativity?
They describe intuition as like grasping the whole world in motion instead of trying to, define everything based on the past.
That's interesting. It's like analyzing a painting versus just feeling the emotions it evokes.
Great analogy. Shows how mindfulness and intuition can help us escape those mental ruts and see things with fresh eyes.
So it's not just thinking differently, but experiencing the world differently too.
Bingo. And they emphasize, not forcing it, letting go of that, like striving, overthinking that can block creativity and intuition.
Like that saying, let go and let God. We got to surrender to the flow sometimes, trust that inspiration will come.
Beautifully put. And they go on to talk about how to cultivate this kind of mindful creativity through conditional learning, which we touched on earlier.
Right, the this could be versus this IS way of thinking. I'm really digging this idea, how it helps us, you know, break out of those mental boxes.
Powerful stuff.
Yeah.
And research shows it can actually boost creativity. Remember that study where they showed people objects in those two different ways?
The this is a hairdryer versus this could be a hairdryer one, right?
Yep. And the results were like night and day. The could be folks were way more likely to think beyond the object's normal use, come up with new stuff.
It makes sense, right? If you're told something can only be one thing, you don't think outside the box. But if it could be multiple things, boom, possibilities explode.
The power of conditional learning. And it makes you wonder about, how we do education.
Yeah, I'm thinking about that too. All that focus on memorizing, finding the right answer, is it actually hurting kids' natural creativity?
It's a valid point. Maybe we need to rethink how we teach, encourage more exploring, questioning, being okay with uncertainty and different perspectives.
Instead of the right answer, it's what if, and explore all the options.
Exactly. And the source points to some research on dyslexic folks. They often experience the world with more uncertainty, and they actually tend to be more mindful and creative.
That's so cool. Their brains are already like wired for that this could be mindset.
Right. Shows that embracing uncertainty, not being scared of it, can actually help us grow and be more creative.
It's like that quote, the only constant is change. To thrive in a world that's always changing, maybe we got to embrace change, not resist it.
Brilliant. And speaking of change, the source also gets into how analogies play a role in both mindfulness and creativity.
Oh, I love analogies. They're like little bridges in your mind connecting ideas that seem totally separate. Tell me more about this.
Well, think about it. To use analogies, we got to see similarities between things that at first glance seem totally different. It's about like breaking out of our normal thought patterns.
So another way to bust out of those mental boxes and see things from a new angle.
Got it. And they emphasize that this thinking in analogies, it's super important for both mindfulness and creativity. Helps us see the world with fresh eyes, make new connections, and come up with innovative ideas.
They even mention, like,
Yeah.
Einstein, his big theories, they came from seeing connections between, totally different fields.
That's what happens when you think outside the box, take a more holistic view.
I'm seeing how it all fits together now. Mindfulness, creativity, aging, the power of our mindset. It's like this big web of possibilities.
It is. And the source leaves us with this question. How can we use all this to, live more mindfully, creatively, and vibrantly, no matter how old we are?
The big question, right? We've covered so much, but I feel like we're just scratching the surface.
I think so too.
Yeah.
But even these first steps, they can be really powerful. If we can shift our thinking about aging and embrace mindfulness and creativity, who knows what we can do?
It's a beautiful thought. And for everyone listening, if you're feeling inspired to explore this more, we're going to dive even deeper in the next part. Stay tuned. This has been, I gotta say, super inspiring, but honestly a little intimidating too. Like, yeah, changing our mindset sounds great, but actually doing it, especially about something as, deep rooted as how we see aging.
Yeah, I get that. Think about it, right? We're constantly hit with messages about aging, most of them negative, from the media, our culture, even our own thoughts. It's easy to feel kind of overwhelmed, like, what's the point?
Totally. Feels like trying to swim upstream sometimes.
But remember that study, the time travel one. Our brains, they're pretty amazing, adaptable even as we age. Never too late to start, questioning those beliefs and creating a new story about aging well.
That helps for sure. So, not about erasing every negative thought, which seems impossible, but more about actively choosing to focus on the positive, creating a more empowering view.
Exactly. We have more control than we think. We can choose to see the good stuff, the opportunities that come with aging, instead of getting stuck on the limitations.
That time travel experiment is such a powerful example, right? Even small changes to our environment, our mindset, can really make a difference.
Shows we're not just along for the ride. We can actually shape how we experience getting older.
And it's not just physical, right? It's about finding purpose, meaning in each stage of life.
Absolutely. The source talks about how cultures that value their elders, their wisdom, they tend to have a much more positive view of aging in general. It's recognizing that it's not just decline, it's growth too, contributing.
It's like we spend the first part of life learning, gaining experience, and then we get to share that, make a difference.
That's a great way to think about it. Instead of what we lose as we age, it's what we gain, right? Wisdom, perspective, understanding ourselves and the world better.
It all comes back to mindfulness, doesn't it? Being present, open to new experiences, and challenging those beliefs that hold us back.
For sure. Mindfulness helps us appreciate each moment, be grateful for what we have, and, approach getting older with grace and curiosity.
This whole deep dive has been, wow, a real eye-opener. I feel like I have a totally new view on aging. Honestly, I'm kind of excited about what's ahead.
That's awesome. And remember, this is just the start. There's a ton more to discover about mindfulness and how it can change how we experience aging.
I'm definitely feeling inspired to keep learning. And for everyone listening, if there's one thing to take away from all this, it's that our mindset about aging, it matters. It can really shape our experience.
So yeah, challenge those limiting beliefs, be curious, see the possibilities, and, embrace the journey with an open mind and heart.
Beautifully said. And hey, maybe we can all change the story of aging together. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. And until next time, keep those minds curious and those perspectives shifting.